Racism in this country is institutionalized. It is something that not only is institutionalized, but it is constantly evolving. You look today at the numbers, statistically, and there are instances in this country where you can look and see where affirmative action has been taken away. If you go look in California, and he hit on this as well, when you look at, in the 90s, they took away affirmative action in the school systems in California. Every institution, Berkeley, UCLA, Stanford, the numbers of African Americans in those programs dropped. Did the people who were qualified in those programs go down? No, but the numbers went down because affirmative action was taken away. And statistically, it can be proven in every opportunity that affirmative action has been taken away from an institution or organization, the numbers and the opportunities for African Americans have gone down because racism is an institutionalized thing in this country. And it has evolved. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, a person could get released from prison, and we know that a large number of African American males are in prison. It's a disproportionate number population-wise. The opportunities for those gentlemen don't exist anymore. That's why we have such a high recidivism rate. There's not an opportunity to come. It's how racism has evolved. It's how we're taking away opportunities. And we're constantly taking away opportunities from African Americans in this country, and we're finding new ways to discriminate. So to take away the one program that is put in place to offer some type of equality, if anything, it sets us backwards. And there need to be more programs put in place to help and offer that equality, because there's still a huge divide in the opportunities and the achievement of African Americans in this country and other races of people.
Okay, let me just summarize the last two comments in sort of one sentence, and that isn't affirmative action really required simply by simple justice and to assure equality?
I think, am I on? Do I need to do something? Yes. I think that taking one of your specific illustrations, there's a factual error in the underpinnings. Your argument that with the elimination of affirmative action in some educational programs, absolute numbers of African Americans in those programs went down, and that's attributable in some way to racism. You know, it's also attributable to some substantial changes in the makeup of American populations. The proportions of African Americans, the proportions of white Americans making up the population of the United States are both decreasing. The proportions of Asian Americans and the proportion of Hispanic Americans who make up the American population are both growing. And if you look at raw numbers and you look at proportions, which different kinds of people...
This country has not changed in decades.
I'm sorry?
It's been around 14, it's been between 14 and 17% for the last 15 years.
Look at numbers in our own city in Chicago. Look at numbers across the country. The proportions of Asian Americans and proportions of Hispanic Americans are growing relative both to white Americans and African Americans, and that's going to speak in outcomes in terms of educational populations and employment populations. Racism, let's step back to the really big picture. Racism is not an American phenomenon. Racism is a universal phenomenon, isn't it? Oppression is a universal phenomenon. I mean, most of human society, most of the human condition, around the world in every civilization, every continent, life is, in Hobbes' term, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. What's different about American society from the beginning is that the American founding raises the flag of these ideals of equality before the law, political equality, legal equality, social equality, these notions of individual autonomy that are not widely dispersed historically or geographically around the world. These are peculiarly American notions. And so what's different about America is that we blow the whistle on these errors, these human errors. In order to be hypocritical, you have to have some standards, right? If you have no standards, you can't be hypocritical, right? Because the idea of hypocrisy is having ideals and failing to live up to them. That's the pity and the glory of America, isn't it? That we're capable of being hypocrites because we have standards, we have principles that we really believe in. Now, if our principle is the principle of equality, that government, you know, we're never going to use the tools. We can never perform political surgery on people's hearts and go in and change the way people think about race or think of, you know, their own self-esteem or anything else. You know, we can habituate people to treat each other with decency, but you can't perform that kind of surgery on people's hearts, at least through the tools of politics. We try to do it through the tools of religion and culture and the like, but you can't command it. You can't command changes of hearts and punish people if they don't change the way they feel. But what we can do is we can change the way government behaves. And if the historic problem is that government discriminates, that government favors some people and burdens other people for no reason other than their race, and we say that's wrong, we don't cure that by reversing the polarity.
What is the burden?
I'm sorry?
What is the burden?
Going to the back of the bus, saying, no, sorry, there's no room for you. This other person is going to get the job, or this other person is going to get the seat in school by operation of law, by the dictate of government, solely because of his race, and he's the right race, you're the wrong race, you're out. That's the burden. We cannot ask government to treat people as blocks, can we? I mean, isn't that the heart of the problem? Isn't that what's wrong when we say we're going to confer benefits on the basis of race, black classes, black stratification, rather than individuals? Isn't every individual entitled to just treatment?
The government treats people as blacks all the time. Whether it be
Isn't that the problem?
Put people in a certain tax bracket, whether it be by giving certain benefits to people who are in certain fields, such as farming or technology or going into green. The government does it all the time. So we only discriminate when it comes to. So we only have a problem with doing it when it's something that's not advantageous to the majority.
Government has to. Well, government differentiates among people all the time. People who are criminal and people who are not. People who are rich, people who are poor. But that's different than treating people, having government treat people differently solely on the basis of their skin color, isn't it?
That's what they've been doing all along.
And is the way to achieve a just result simply to reverse the polarity and say, well, okay, now for the next 300 years we're going to discriminate against white people and in favor of black people? Or is the way to solve the problem to stop the governmental discrimination period?
You don't stop it. What you do is, and you have to look at government and say, okay, let's do more affirmative action. You know, for so long.
Well, we do affirmative action for everybody.
For so long, you've been doing a certain thing. It's very hard for you to change your behavior. So, government has to change its mind and its behavior. Now, how do you do that? You can't change your mind and your behavior. The people who are running the government saying they're going to change themselves. But just like what we're doing today, they need to probably listen to the people who are being affected by it and come up with some type of strategy so that we can reach equality as much as possible.
I'm going to inject her because I wanted this opportunity. If I don't say so, I'm raising my hand. Attorney Morris, I heard you say to Attorney John that he had not defined affirmative action. And it appears that affirmative action is going to, the definition of it depends on who is perceiving it. Okay. For instance, I see affirmative action as what Frederick Douglass said, what Dr. Wallace pointed out. Let him alone. Give him a chance. He will stand on his own 2 feet. But others see it as a helping hand with the underlying presumption that whoever is being helped is not qualified to do whatever assistance is being given. For instance, if you have quotas in education, you have a certain number of African Americans that have to be in the program, the underlying assumption is that those who are given admission pursuant to affirmative action is not qualified to be there. So I go back to the question, what has been posed. All I hear about is, all I'm hearing is that this is not the method, this is not the way to do it. Then tell me what is. Because we're not living in that society whereas everybody is judged by the content of their character. That's not where we're at. So what's the answer? If you do affirmative action, then what do you put in its place that's better?
let me just summarize that for a second. The question is basically getting back to how do you define affirmative action, and if you get rid of it, what do you put in its place?
Nothing. You didn't need affirmative action before this. We had people. I told you there's a list of things that people were doing, and if you look at what's going on, first of all, you got to decide. Give me some evidence that affirmative action is doing what you think it's supposed to be doing. First of all, he talked about how you can't change the heart of an individual. I'm an ordained minister. Part of the human condition is that we're sinners, and as part of that sin, people find reasons to dislike you. I mean, we even have a thing amongst the African-American community about whether you're light-skinned or dark-skinned. I mean, we've got that going on, unfortunately, where we fight amongst one another. But you can't legislate results. You can't make something happen. The problem with admissions, and the guy's not here, I wish he was here. One of the things that Thomas Sowell brings out is that when they stopped affirmative action in California and in Texas, with their admissions programs, they found out that, the admission rate for blacks in the upper echelon schools began to drop, but they were dispersed among the other colleges. So the idea was that, and you had the higher graduation rate. You had people actually going to schools where they should have been going to schools instead of going to a school that was beyond their capability to perform. I have that personal experience with my son. My son went to RIT, was accepted at RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology. Great school. He wanted to go to study video games, put together video games, right? And I told him if he was going to go to do that, he had to go to accredited school. He wanted to go to some other rinky-dink school. And I said, no, you got to go to a good school. So he got accepted at RIT. And, I mean, he's a smart kid. He had average ACT scores. But he got there, and this stuff was just over his head. And they had trimesters, so the school year was going by like that. And he ended up flunking out. He was going to drop out and not go to school. But I found out where he had kind of changed his idea of what he wanted to study, and it turned out that they had it over at Columbia. I said, why don't you go and enroll at Columbia, go and see what it's like, but his ego had been damaged because of what happened at RIT. He was in a school that was beyond his capability. He goes to Columbia, and he graduated in 3 years. So, part of that is if affirmative action. We have to actually take a look and see if affirmative action is actually doing what we said it's supposed to be doing. And I think we've held it a little higher than I think it's possible for what affirmative action is supposed to do. It's not going to change. If somebody's a racist, they're going to be a racist. It's not going to change being a racist because we have affirmative action. I think we need to allow people to, let me go back. Affirmative action, to me, starts in the home. Affirmative action starts with what Thomas Sowell was saying. I think everybody here really, would agree with having school choice, allowing our kids to go to better schools, allowing schools to compete. And if African Americans can start at a lower level getting a better education, then they become better or more qualified or better suited than to go to more prestigious school. We've had blacks go to prestigious schools, such as W.E.B. Du Bois, I think was the first African American to get his PhD from Harvard. There was another person in this list that I have, I don't have his name in front of me, was the first to get his PhD in physics from Yale. And this is all before affirmative action. So, I mean, there are opportunities, but, there are also races out there. You're not going to wipe out all the racists. And I think that sometimes it sounds as though we're trying to wipe out all the racists with affirmative action so then we don't ever have any obstacles in front of us.
But that's assuming that's what affirmative action is supposed to do. It's not to get rid of the racists. Affirmative action is to put things on an even playing field. Then let the people move forward. So if the laws that preceded the people before they're allowed to be at the table to play on the level playing field already put the people behind, then you eradicate and get rid of the laws and then say now play catch up, then affirmative action is definitely needed because there's this gap that needs to be bridged.
But does it work? Do you have any indications where
that's what affirmative
works?
action does. It bridges the gap. It says, the law legislates the people. It governs the land. So the people who are lawless in their heart, the law cannot begin to legislate morals, but the laws can legislate ethics. And that's all we're talking about. And so the law is for the lawless. So those who do not have the law of the Lord inscripted in their heart need the law of the land to guide their principles to move forward. Therefore, we definitely need affirmative action because of the people who started out behind the 8 ball. Now, purportedly, the 8 ball's moved aside, but it is still there. And if the laws that are consistently keep being written and policies that are keeping the people from being able to get to a level playing field, then you're basically keeping them constantly underfoot. So affirmative action is needed to basically watchdog.
Is there any empirical evidence that has shown that affirmative action, and I'm not talking about, because someone like Thomas Sowell will say affirmative action works for African Americans who have money. The blacks that end up going to the Harvard and the Yales are generally the blacks who hang out with the doctors anyway, live on the same level, have the same income and so forth, end up going to those schools. So affirmative action helps those who already have, but does it really help those who were poor?
Oh, we're
You keep saying African American, then of course, okay, there's African American, Latino American, Asian American, and then it's almost always understood that Caucasians are American. Everyone else needs that disclaimer at the beginning of their class before their reference. Someone to say, well, I'm an African American, so why is it necessary to define yourself as your ethnic group within America if it is a level playing field? So it's already set aside in this country depending upon your ethnic group. So affirmative action speaks to the disproportionate access that all the ethnic groups in America has contributed to America. If absent of affirmative action, all these other ethnic groups would not have to say that I'm an Asian American, a Latino American, a Mexican American. It would just be assumed that everybody's just an American and entitled to the same privileges that the Constitution scripts out. But when the Constitution began and it wants to classify the slaves as 3/5 of a people, you started from a bad playing field in the first place. If I'm 3/5, then what is my vote count for? 3/5? So I need another 2/5 to make my one vote a whole? So we have a problem. The Constitution set it all in motion. It was never a level playing field. And that's what affirmative action attempts to do, to bring us back to a level playing field. And you can't remove that because the people who started out building this country, and I heard one say that there were skills that the African American had that the slave owner didn't have. It's not that he didn't have it, he just wasn't forced to develop or cultivate those set of skills because he was not the one doing the physical labor. Necessity breeds invention, and out of necessity, African American did a lot and developed cultivated skills.
Okay, the comment basically was that affirmative action is necessary to produce a level playing field. We haven't heard from the pros. We've heard from the cons a lot. Let's hear something.
Well, I think the crowd's been doing our job for us pretty good so far. But in all seriousness, I do want to respond to some of the comments that the con side has made. I think they made them pointedly. I think they made them well, and I think they need to be responded to very directly. One of them is about this legislating morality. And you know, when Dr. King was fighting to get, for instance, the Civil Rights Act of '64 passed, one of the things that his critics would say at the time is that, you know, you can't